Hi and welcome back to a new video. Today, unfortunately, not a nice topic, and to be fully honest, it's also quite embarrassing for me personally. So over the past years, I took you along my journey from my first YouTube studio to the second, to creating my first own products, to essentially building my own company. And most of the time, things went quite well for me. But this time, it didn't. And it's terrible. And it's also embarrassing. But I think it's also important to highlight these kind of things in a YouTube video, and today we will talk about that. The Seasonic Prime PX 2200 is currently one of the strongest PSUs available, and it comes with two native PCIe 5.1 connectors, which allows to even hook up natively to RTX 5090. That is perfect for any overclocking system or high-end workstations. I'm also currently running this PSU, and so far I'm really satisfied with its quality and performance. The cables are very flexible, there are also cable comms included, and in addition also a 90-degree ATX 24-pin adapter, which also functions as a PSU tester at the same time. The fan is semi-passive, and even at a high load it is still very quiet. Find all information about this PSU in the link in the description. A couple of weeks ago we were already here because I made a video about the global copper situation. The issues we had sourcing these kind of copper plates that we use for our GPU water block production. Back then in October, we were not able to get those. Even at a higher price, they were simply not available in Europe. So we were looking everywhere and we couldn't find anything. And then I thought, okay, I had very good experiences sourcing things in Asia. So let's just try China. And with this, quickly switching into the YouTube studio to tell you the whole story. So at that point, I was like, okay, I will try to source some copper suppliers in China to first see if they have the same kind of issues that we have here in Europe with both availability and pricing. Turns out it was fine over there, at least from the feedback that I was getting. So I sent emails to a lot of different suppliers. And also, I knew from the start that I'm not going to order from a single supplier, because we were aiming to buy 200 of these big copper plates, 190 euro a piece. That's the price that we were paying here. And you can do the math, that's about 40,000 euros worth just of raw material. And for me, the risk of ordering 40,000 euros at a single supplier that I don't know yet was simply too high. So I thought, okay, I will just straight up from the start look for two individual suppliers. I then found two suppliers that looked promising over Alibaba, and I can tell you over the years I had very good experiences with that platform, especially if you're looking for industrial parts. It is very easy to find good and reliable suppliers there, so I have to make that clear. And the two suppliers I found, the first one was listed there for 5 years already, and the other one for 8 years. And they also had a couple hundred verified trades, like verified through Alibaba, with ratings, with pictures and everything. So that already gives you typically some sort of safety, just a base to start with. I also asked a different partner that we have in China to reach out to one of them to ask for a quotation to find out if this is authentic or not. And they said, sounds all plausible and normal to them. So I continued with the negotiation about payment terms, because if you're looking at 20,000 euros of value, you wouldn't want to pay all of this in advance without knowing your supplier. On the other hand, they also don't know you as a customer. You're sitting on the other side of the globe and you're ordering, or you're trying to order raw material for 20,000 euros. It also makes sense that they wouldn't agree on just sending stuff out without any payment, right? So we agreed on 30% advance payment, and then 70% once the stuff is on the ship and it's confirmed by a third party that the goods are actually on the way to us. Then everything kind of went its way. Everything was all right. Communication was always clear and good. I couldn't complain about that. And I also always asked about pictures of the goods in between, like from production, for example. For example, I wanted to check the thickness of the plate, if this is exactly 12 millimeter that I ordered, or too much or too little. Then also the length and the width of those plates to see how the edge of the plate looks like, how it's processed, if it's maybe bent or not. But all of this looked all right. In addition, we also ordered aluminum plates from one of those suppliers, because that's what we also need for this big frame that we are using and milling for the GPU cooler. And these are milled out of a 30 millimeter thick plate. And same thing here with aluminum. I was able to verify this just when it comes to the thickness of the plate, other dimensions, length, width, also to see how the edges look like, how they are made, and also the quantities that they were making. And the images I'm showing is just a few, like I had a lot more that they sent to me. And then at some point they confirmed that everything was packed and that they are transporting this to the vessel. Then we had the confirmation which kind of vessel, which ship it's going to be. We received tracking information. We received confirmation that the material and the weight is actually shipped onto the container. And then we did the remaining 70% payment. And then we had to wait even longer because it's sea freight, and currently that takes about 40 days from China to Germany, but there's no other way. We were considering air freight at some point, but air freight, we were talking about a couple of tons in weight for the material. It's just not worth it. You would pay like 10,000 euros just for air freight. And then you can just not do the topic overall because you would eat up too much of your own margin. So we had to do sea freight and just wait. And then sometime in February, we received the goods. Packed in multiple boxes because it was a lot of material. It also looked pretty nice first sight. So that's one of the boxes, and I first obviously checked dimensions to see, is the width exactly what we need? And it was exactly 28 centimeters, and the length was also good. So just dimensional wise, that looked promising. Then I used an angle to check if the plates are flat. That also looked pretty good. And then obviously it was also time to check purity of the plates, to check if they are exactly 100%, well, 99.99% copper. So I took small pliers and I removed a small edge, like tiny piece of copper right here, and then put this under the scanning electron microscope where I can do EDX analysis and check if this is 99.99 something percent copper. And then put everything into the SEM. That's also what we can see inside. So tiny pieces of 2 plates. I took 2 samples to just check purity of 2 plates at once. I then zoomed into the exact working distance that I need for the EDX. I also added some measurement for you so you can see it's just about 1 millimeter particle size that I used as just a sample to test the copper purity. And then EDX tells me it is indeed 100% copper. So that looks pretty good, right? Following thing is performance. Thermal conductivity. This is a conductivity meter, surface conductivity meter, and I have a reference plate, right? The one we talked about earlier. So if I attach the probe, then you see it's measuring currently like 98% IACS. It's not calibrated right now. 100% would equal like perfectly clean and nice conductivity of copper. But we know like 98% is what we would kind of expect right now. So then check the China copper. So whenever I put the probe onto the surface, it should make a beeping noise. Like right now you would think I'm measuring 98.1, but I'm actually not measuring anything because it's not detecting anything. I'm putting it on the surface and it's simply not detecting anything. We then took some sandpaper because I thought, hey, maybe there is some, I don't know, anti-corrosion protective layer or anything on top, right? So started just grinding a little bit and then tried to test, nothing, right? Whenever I did it, nothing happened. And at that point I was pretty confused. I double checked with the other plate. Every single time it's detecting the copper that we're expecting, but on these plates, nothing. I didn't understand it, so we just decided to put one onto the CNC mill. And the plate we used to test milling is this one. Where you can see it looks silverish. And during milling there were sparks, a lot of sparks. And that is something you typically don't experience when you mill copper or aluminium. You wouldn't have this, right? And one of my colleagues then said, hey, I think we have to get a magnet. And you can see the plate is magnetic. Same as this plate, same as this one, and all the others. So all of them, they are not copper plates, they are copper-coated steel plates. Every single one. And it's not only a thin layer of copper, they put a lot of copper around it, otherwise I wouldn't have detected 100% copper under the EDX, right? So I honestly just felt like an idiot. At that point, I was like, where did I screw up? Like at which point was I not careful enough? And yeah, that was difficult because I thought, okay, this is like 20,000 euros that basically go into the trash. There's nothing else we can do. And then I thought, but you know, we said we will use 2 suppliers, right? Just to make sure that in any case, we will not lose everything of our investment. And that's the shipment of the second supplier, where we also ordered aluminum. And you can see those are aluminum plates. A lot of plates, and it's aluminum. So we can see it's not magnetic. It is tested. This is aluminum. So that's great in theory. So you can see those are these huge plates I was talking about, 30 millimeters thick, that we need to make those cases for the RTX 5090 water blocks. But yeah, they were shipped on 2 pallets. That's the second pallet, and I think we have to look into the box. We have a lot of aluminum plates right here, so that all looks good. And then, yeah, suddenly steel plates, and then underneath, nothing. Yeah, because you know, steel is heavier than aluminum. That's why they just thought, okay, we will add a big layer of steel underneath that makes up so the weight of the shipment makes kind of sense. And if you're checking the top plates, then nothing looks suspicious, right? You wouldn't unload everything, but the bottom 50-60% steel and hollow. And then we also had the second copper shipment. We had 2 of these boxes that arrived. And you can see, first of all, how professional this was shipped. That looked already terrible, absolutely terrible. But the magnet doesn't stick, which is great news, right? Right? Well, not really. At least, as you can see, the conductivity meter works, but it's only showing 85% IACS. First, I thought the purity is just really bad, but then we can maybe just scrap them and still get a good amount of money for copper, because copper scrap prices also rose quite a bit. Yeah, so we checked underneath, and these are copper plates, big and heavy. And a lot of magnetic stuff underneath. It's been a couple of weeks, and I still can hardly believe this. That this happened twice on this scale. Yeah, embarrassing, and also it's a financial problem, right? Like, this is 40,000 euros that we invested into this, and it's not only the loss in the raw material, but also the products that we were not able to make. And I mean, we will get a couple of, I don't know, maybe we'll get 2,000, 3,000 euros back from scrap, but that doesn't really help us, right? Yeah. I also thought a long time about if I'm going to cover this in a YouTube video or not, because I can tell you this is super embarrassing for me. I feel like an absolute idiot, and then thinking, what could I have done better in retrospective? And that's not easy. We even discussed back then if it makes sense to just get one big copper plate over air freight, over express, evaluate that plate, and then do the mass order. But if somebody wants to scam you with such an amount of criminal energy, then they will do it anyway, right? That's basically what happened. But if we would get a plate in advance, you can test that, you will order, and they would do exactly the same. So yeah, I'm not sure if there was a way for me to prevent this. Then we were thinking about what to do, right? Like, do you do legal consequences? Obviously, I reached out to them and asked them, yo guys, what the hell is this? And I'm still in contact with one of them, which is surprising, and I'm waiting for more responses, but I honestly don't have much hope. And then you might think, okay, what about legal action, right? You try to get your money back somehow in China, but the chances for success for this in China is super low. Like, for a German company doing something in China like this, it's almost impossible that you will succeed, and it will cost you a lot more time and money. And yeah, I'm not sure what to do right now. I will see. if there's any update, I will update you. And yeah, that's one reason why we have delays, and yeah, not so nice. I hope you still somewhat enjoyed this video. See you next time. Bye bye.